Thank you, Lisa. Welcome everyone to Ask the Dietitian. My name is Lori Bumbaco. I'm an oncology dietitian. I work here at Cancer Wellness Center, and I am really happy to be able to be involved with this program we call Ask the Dietitian because we choose a topic for the month and we get to allow our participants to ask any question related to the topic. And then I try my best to answer those questions based on my experience and knowledge related to oncology nutrition. So this month for October, we chose a popular topic. It's all about nutrition and cognition. And so we had so many questions that were asked from our participants that we had to have part two. And so now you're watching segment number 2 for Ask the Dietitian for the month of October. I handled really most of the questions in part 1. If you didn't get a chance to catch that, have no fear. You just have to head on over to our YouTube channel, Cancer Wellness Center, and you'll see all of the recordings of basically everything that's ever done at this center, by the way, plus the Ask the Dietitian monthly presentations, which are available for you to access for nothing, right at your own pace. So it's really helpful information. Hopefully you agree. So what I'm going to do is what I typically do and share my screen and provide for you a PowerPoint. And we're going to just pick up where we left off with those questions for the month of October, nutrition and cognition. I'm so happy you are all here to watch. Thank you so much for being here. I just have to juggle some things around, so bear with me for a moment. And again, thank you for being here. It's really such a pleasure to be able to provide this content for you and to answer your questions specifically. Now, sometimes what happens, our participants ask some questions that are unrelated to the topic. And so that's sort of a collection of what's remaining for this part 2. But they're really such great questions that I didn't want to leave them unanswered. So hopefully today I'll be able to give you some helpful tips and answer these specific questions. All right, so here's where we left off. I have a high inflammatory marker. Since being diagnosed with CLL, I try to avoid processed food and sugar, but it has not helped. So diet and inflammation, what a complicated relationship that is. So we do know based on the research that there is such a thing as an anti-inflammatory diet, and it has been shown to be able to lower levels of inflammatory markers. So the person that submitted this question or comment mentioned that they noticed one of their markers seems to be elevated still. So they tried, and I give them so much credit for doing that because I bet it helped on some level. But here's what we know, and based in the research, that what seems to be like the Mediterranean diet. Now, keep in mind, that's not just Italian and Greek food. The Mediterranean encompasses 23 different countries, and some will say that like the Turkish cuisine is probably the most exemplary of the foods and the compounds that seem to be so beneficial about the Mediterranean diet. But we'll save that for another Ask the Dietitian, right? And then there's also a research group, and then since that time, which has been over 10 years now, they developed something called the Dietary Inflammatory Index, or the DII for short. And that has been specifically shown along with the Mediterranean diet to lower all-cause mortality among cancer survivors. So whether or not it's helping with inflammation as part of that mix, great. But we also know that the foods that are included in the Mediterranean diet and the Dietary Inflammatory Index, the ones that are anti-inflammatory, happen to be really stinking healthy foods anyway. So it wouldn't hurt to include them more often than not. Now, sometimes we might have a condition or a disease or something like CLL that requires treatment also, which is inflammatory on multiple levels, right? The condition, the disease might be, but also the treatment might be as well. There might be other conditions that we have that are contributing to inflammation. So it becomes a little bit more complex, and it might not necessarily be straightforward as, well, I don't eat this, I've cut that out, how come my inflammation is still there? We don't know. Maybe it has lowered the inflammation to some extent. It's hard to really say, right, without knowing a little bit more to that story. I would ask, like, could the diet have lowered it to any degree at all in what that person did? And maybe the addition of anti-inflammatory foods, I would like to ask the person, now the dietitian's asking the question, but I would like to know, besides cutting out some foods, were there some anti-inflammatory foods that were also increased? And maybe that combination is what's necessary to reap some benefits. If you didn't have any of those anti-inflammatory foods or you cut back on the pro-inflammatory foods, would the degree of inflammation have gone up? It's hard to really say, right? I think if you want to know more about inflammation, you certainly can check out in August, just a couple months ago, we dedicated an Ask the Dietitian just to this topic, specifically inflammation. So it's right on our YouTube channel again. So if you want to check that out, I thought it was very helpful and informative. But I think that this is a good example of when diet is not necessarily the end all be all, right? I think it's powerful medicine, but it might not necessarily be enough. So hopefully you're leveraging your food choices in a way that you feel empowered by, because there's got to be a benefit to that, right? That you choose what to put into your body. And that probably on some level, and maybe it's not with inflammation, but on some level that must be helping you. Okay, but if you have more questions, I'm here to consult with one-on-one if you'd like to explore that further. I'm going to move on to the next question. Can you explain what DPA, EPA, and DHA are? Omega-3 supplements versus fish oil or krill oil, what are the differences and which one is better? Is it safe to cook with extra virgin olive oil? If not, what's a healthy substitute? So a few questions in this single submission, which I love. All right, so let's start first with DPA, EPA, and DHA. They're all members of the omega-3 fatty acid family. Although fish oils contain more than 40 different fatty acids, did you know that? The health benefits of fish oil intake have mostly been attributed to EPA or eicosapentaenoic, say that 5 times fast, and docosahexaenoic acids. That's why we just use the acronyms, EPA and DHA. Those are the two most abundant, and that's why most of the research and most of the information we have about omega-3s and fish oils is related to EPA and DHA. Now, the third most prevalent omega-3 in fish oil, I'm not going to pronounce it, I'm just going to write to the acronym, DPA. It's gaining traction among both scientists and consumers as an important contributor to the beneficial effects of fish oil intake. So maybe this third one is new to the team, but a helpful player in the team. So most fish oils contain less than 2% DPA by weight, whereas 1/3 to 1/5 of the EPA or DHA is contributing to total omega-3 content. So it's like it occurs in relatively smaller proportions, but it's still there and it still might matter, right? The levels of DPA in human milk, human breast milk, are higher than those of EPA and comparable to those of DHA, implicating it as a potentially important component to human development. The similarity of DPA to EPA and DHA may explain some of its overlapping biological functions with these better studied fatty acids. So what I'm basically trying to say here is that the chemical structure is what lends its physiological properties in the body, and they're very similar. They're different, but they're similar. And so they think because of those similarities, they sort of have the same outcome in our body in beneficial ways. So in vitro, which that's like petri dishes and test tubes, and then in vivo studies, so that's in animals and sometimes in human studies, they've shown both types of research have shown direct effects of DPA on inflammation, lipid metabolism, and cognitive function. So I think it deserves a place or a seat at the table, right? Just like EPA and DHA. We know that EPA is the best known anti-inflammatory omega-3 fat. And DHA is right behind it, but now DPA is also showing some promising signs of being anti-inflammatory, but also the other benefits as you see listed here. There's at least 8 other omega-3 fatty acids that have beneficial biological effects. We just don't know enough right now, so we're going to have to stay tuned for that. So let's move on to supplements. So fish oil supplements are typically made from anchovies, herring, menhaden, and salmon. Some may have additional antioxidants that are added to that, and that helps to prevent the breakdown or the oxidation of them. So typically you might see like a vitamin E in your fish oil, and that helps just to kind of protect the oil so it doesn't break down, and when we take it, it works in the best way possible. Krill because the question asked about krill. So krill, for those in the audience that might not know, they're crustaceans that look like tiny shrimp, and this is a picture of krill. They're kind of cute, right? Krill are an alternative source of EPA and DHA and be increasingly popular. They've been around for a while, but I think, again, not as popular as the other commonly used fish oil supplements from anchovies and herring and salmon, typically. The content of EPA and DHA varies by the species used and the season. I had no idea about that. So there's a lot of variability here, right? And so it becomes a little tricky, and that's sort of the nature of not only supplements, but nutrition and our diet in general. There's a lot of variability, right? So there's a lot of like best guess. We may not ever have like concrete, unequivocal data about things. So we have to just sort of assume that what we do most of the time is going to help us most of the time, right? And not to get bogged down by the details about things like how much EPA is in my fish oil, right? So as it relates further to dietary supplements, and this stands for all dietary supplements, not just fish oil, but we want to look for those that are really kind of tested and by a third party. So Consumer Lab, NSF, USP, and Informed Choice, those are all the labels that you might see on a supplement. Like sometimes they'll just stamp right on the brand, or if you'll see it on the website potentially. Those give us a little bit more of a guarantee, I guess I would say, use the word guarantee, a little bit more reassurance that what's in the bottle is what they claim. The manufacturer claims isn't actually in the bottle, that it's free from contamination. They use good manufacturing practices. So it's a little bit more of a, if you're going to spend your money on a supplement, let's find one that's verified using one of these independent third-party testers. I would say also too, if you're going to invest in fish oil, remember it's oil. So if it's exposed to conditions that might make it go rancid or oxidize, then that's not necessarily good for us, right? So we want to keep it free from like high temperatures in terms of the heat. Maybe not, make sure that cap on the bottle is screwed tight so no air gets in. Most supplements I see are not translucent, so because light would also potentially damage oils as well. So we just want to keep that in mind. I would caution against taking omega-3 supplements if you have AFib, if you have inflammatory bowel disease, so that includes both Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. If you're on a blood thinning medication, or if you're about ready to go into surgery, you need to just double check with your healthcare team. I want to take fish oil, or I have this. Can I take it? Is it safe? That's all we're looking to do, is keep you safe and protected, and also just cross-reference any contraindications with any prescription medications as well. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Which one to take? Oh boy, is that a tricky question to answer. So we don't know necessarily how effective supplements are because they've never done the research, right? So again, we're just making assumptions that a supplement that has the omega-3s from sardines will work in the same way that as if we ate the sardines, right? So it's really tricky to answer this question, but here's what we know, that up to 3 grams of, and you can read this right on the label, EPA and DHA is designated as generally recognized as safe, or GRAS. That should be a capital A there. So up to 3 grams, I would not take more than 3 grams, especially after you checked with your healthcare team. Okay, that's that's really the safest limit. If you take without food, consider a form, a type of supplement that's triglyceride, it'll say it right on the bottle, or a re-esterified triglyceride. So that helps you absorb it better after taking it. And so a lot of times people are like, Lori, just give me examples. So here you go. So this is just based on my own practice, consulting with other dietitians who might use them and find them beneficial. This is sort of our working list of options to take. Okay, so Nordic Naturals is a very popular one. They're consistently rated pretty high with these third-party testers in terms of an option. Garden of Life has an advanced omega that's also been third party tested. Wow. Nature Made as a brand as a whole is pretty solid, and it's easily accessible and I think affordable. So that's always almost always on the list as well. And then sometimes people look for vegan versions because either they are vegan or they may have an allergy or an intolerance to fish. So there are omega-3 supplements made from algae. So you can also source it that way as well. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Now we're going to move on to extra virgin olive oil. Can we cook with it? Right, that's basically what the gist of the question was. So did you know, if you've been thinking that smoke point was an indication of whether or not an oil was okay to cook with, that has been disproven, right? So what we know, and this has been ongoing since 2018, that smoke point is not a good indicator of the stability of the compounds and the acids, fatty acids in the oil. So this was a pretty important study, but then since then, more research has confirmed that this is the case, that common cooking oils, they kind of tested, they lined up all the different types of oils and then they cooked with them at all different temperatures. And they found that smoke point did not matter in terms of an oil stability. And here's sort of, I'm going to just fast forward here. So here's what it really comes down to, especially as it relates to extra virgin olive oil. When you look at a high quality oil, there are compounds that are in it that protect it from breaking down. And that means it makes it more stable. I think that's the word we're looking for there. So just because something has a low smoke point doesn't mean that it breaks down. It doesn't mean that it's less stable, as it turns out. And it's a very important concept to communicate, because I think sometimes there are some people or websites or good old Dr. Google that are still kind of communicating that a low smoke point isn't an oil to use when cooking, when that's actually not the case, right? We've kind of disproven that. So what's in extra virgin olive oil that's so special? Polyphenols are the top of the list. They are phytochemicals that seem to help the breakdown of the fatty acids in the olive oil. So we already know that there's a lot of health benefits associated with the extra virgin olive oil, and partly why the Mediterranean diet might be so beneficial for us. It seems to be anti-inflammatory. It seems to reduce oxidative stress, and that's because of the vitamin E. And it has numerous other health benefits as well associated with it. So we can use extra virgin olive oil to cook. Did you know that? And in the Mediterranean, where they use a lot of extra virgin olive oil, they're using it in every cooking method under the sun. So they're frying with it. They're dumping it at the table. They use it in all possible ways, right? So we find that that cooking method doesn't matter. And that using olive oil in cooking is a perfectly safe and reasonable and potentially healthful choice. So a little bit more about extra virgin olive oil. It seems to be the one to go to. It's got lots of antioxidants. I guess it has that vitamin E. We already know it's low. It has mostly unsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats. So that lends to a hard protective diet. But all those extra compounds like the polyphenols especially really help make it a high quality and nutritious oil. So how do we know what to look for when we're looking for our oils? A lot of it may come down to, and this is where you can kind of challenge your palate, right? You're going to look for something that tastes fresh. Can you do that when you line up your oils? Like, let's see if you can experiment with that moving forward. We want one that has a little bit of a bitterness to it or a pungency. And some people describe that as like a tingling sensation in the back of your throat. That's indicative of the polyphenol content. That means it retained more. It's like a little more fresh, right? And sometimes we'll find olive oils that have a little stamped date of when it was harvested and when it is best until. So I encourage people to look at that in the grocery store. You'll see there's many different brands that are doing that now. So again, just like the supplements, if you're asking for names, here's some names, okay? So the first three from left to right, so the Bertolli, up to the 365 oils, those are great for cooking. And this is according to like a Consumer Reports article. And then I'm a big fan of California Olive Ranch. It's accessible. Sometimes I buy oils that are on sale or not. Again, I check those dates to see. But these are all sort of rating pretty highly in terms of good choices for extra virgin olive oil if you're looking for options. All right, moving on. I think this is the last question. So, best supplements or vitamins to increase the immune system? Great question. Like this time of year, right? We're coming into a tough time of year with our immune function. So we want to remember there are some misconceptions about immunity. There really truly are no supplements or diets that can boost immune function. And by the way, we don't really want to boost our immune system because that means it's going to be overworked. And autoimmune conditions are a really good example of a overstimulated or overboosted, overworking immune system. So that's kind of a false assumption that we want to boost it, right? We just want our immune system to work, bottom line, right? We just want it to work and not get too tired. So our lifestyle can support this. There's no question. So it's more than just diet. So we want to think about how well we're hydrating. Are we getting adequate sleep? Not only duration, but the quality of the sleep. Are we moving our bodies very often? Are we limiting or moderating our alcohol consumption? Are we coping with stress, right? Cancer Wellness Center is the one-stop shop for anything related to stress reduction, in my opinion. And then can we also pursue some healthy eating habits? So there are no single foods that can prevent illness or boost our immune function. However, we do know that there are some nutrients that are required. We have to eat them in adequate amounts, and this is where a dietitian can help in order to maintain a well-functioning immune system. So the ones that we know of, the strongest data as of right now, and we've known this for a while, is protein. That's an important macronutrient. Our antioxidant vitamins, A, C, and E. And then zinc is a mineral, and that's also an antioxidant, all very important to eat enough of. It doesn't mean the more of these, the better. There's no data that suggests that that's the case. It's not like if we take an exponential amount of these, it's going to protect us or boost our immune system. We just need the right amounts. That's it. Our gut microbiome is also a very important key player and is responsible for the majority of our immune response. So we can support our gut microbiome in terms of its function by feeding the gut microbiota, the beneficial microbes that live there. And we do this by eating a high fiber diet, which most of us are not doing. I think the number used to be like 10%, and now we're down to like 6%. So I have job security. I have a lot of work to do. We all could eat more fiber. Where do we find fiber? In whole plant foods, right? Which also happens to be cancer protective. But also too, regularly consuming some fermented foods. So things like kefir or yogurt, our kimchi, our kombucha, finding those products and squeezing them into our day as well, because those deliver beneficial microbes to our gut microbiome as well. And they're also going to kind of support the immune system that way. There are no supplements that we know of that boost immunity, right? Despite how they're marketed. You always see, even though they're marketed that way, there is fine print on that label. And always make sure to read that fine print that basically what they're claiming has not been proven. All right, so our immune support checklist: consume mostly whole food, plant-based diet to ensure you're consuming adequate nutrients. If you do that, and I think even if you're vegan, you can eat enough protein. That's another misconception. So if you have concerns you're not eating enough of the nutrients that you might require, that's when you can consult with a dietitian. At the same time, it is important to minimize nutrient poor choices that are ultra processed. So sugary beverages are one of the things on the top of that list. They're really not offering much by the way of nutrition, right? So if we can minimize or eliminate them altogether, it makes room for all the other nutrient dense choices we can have. And also limiting some fast foods, processed meat, as well as alcohol. We want to make sure we're resting enough, we're coping with our stress, moving our body. And guess what? We also did an Ask the Dietitian on immune function. So if you check our YouTube channel, and for those who registered, you'll get these slides. So you can just literally click right on that link and you'll be brought right over to that YouTube clip. Okay. So here's my resources. So there was a nice, in part one, we talked all about the MIND diet, and that's a hybrid of the Mediterranean diet with the DASH diet. And there's some really compelling research that mind diet seems to be beneficial for cognition. So if you'd like to read more about that, you'll click right on that link. It is a really comprehensive review of what the mind diet is, what the research suggests, what foods to include in the mind diet, and then it even gives some recipes and some examples. So I think you'll really enjoy that. Today's dietitian is authored and edited by dietitians, so we know we're getting some trustworthy information there. And they had a recent article written up on nutrition's impact on cognitive decline, so you might be interested in that. That was in May of this year. And then because supplements seem to always be asked on Ask the Dietitian, I think it's helpful to check out NIH's website. It's consumer friendly, so you can literally click on any dietary supplement that is known, has been researched, click on it, learn more about it, and bring that information to your healthcare provider if you're interested in trying something to make sure that it's safe for you. Okay. So those who registered also, I'm going to supply some recipes. I like to share that. And the idea is that the recipes are like an application of this information that we just presented. So some of these will certainly include the ingredients that are known to help kind of satisfy that mind diet, right? To support cognition. And hopefully you'll agree with all of these choices. Again, they kind of look cancer protective. I see a lot of high fiber foods. I see a lot of colorful phytonutrients on these images. So one way to really make sure that you're, taking a step in the direction towards cancer protection. So with that being said, I invite you to our November Ask the Dietitian. Our topic is pre and probiotics, and like kind of an extension off immunity. So hopefully you'll agree that's a great topic. You'll have some questions, as always, to ask me, and I'll do my best to answer them. So thank you all for attending. I'm going to end my share here.